Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
My name is Celeste Hargrove Okafor, and I want to be very clear about something before this story begins. I never wanted to destroy my mother's company. For 4 years, I was the reason it survived. She just never knew it was me. The birthday party was for my nephew Dominic, who was turning 7 and had specifically requested a dinosaur cake with green frosting and a triceratops on top. My sister Renata had gone all out, rented tables and chairs, hired a balloon artist, set up a little lawn game area with ring toss and a beanbag throw. It was the kind of party that costs more than it needs to, which was very Renata, and the kind of party Dominic deserved because he was a genuinely wonderful kid who called me Auntie Cece and always saved me the corner piece. I arrived a few minutes late because I'd been on a call with my operations director in Singapore. We were finalizing a logistics partnership that had been 8 months in the making, and I'd had to circle the block twice before the call ended. I parked, fixed my lipstick in the mirror, and walked into the backyard carrying a wrapped gift and a bottle of wine for Renata. The afternoon was warm. There were probably 30 people scattered across the lawn, cousins, family friends, a few of Renata's neighbors. My grandmother was seated near the fence in a folding chair with a cup of something. My uncle Marcus was holding court near the grill. My mother, Patricia Hargrove, was standing near the dessert table in a yellow linen dress, looking exactly like the woman who had built a regional pharmaceutical distribution company from a warehouse in Memphis and spent 30 years making sure everyone knew it. I hugged Renata. I hugged Dominic, who immediately tried to tell me about a dinosaur documentary he'd watched, and I made a mental note to actually watch it so we could talk about it properly. I got a plate of food. I spoke to my grandmother. I was doing fine. It happened about 40 minutes in during the cake. Renata was cutting the dinosaur cake. Green frosting, triceratops, exactly as requested, and someone had said something about how well Dominic was doing in school, which led to a general conversation about the family's next generation, which somehow, as these conversations always do in my family, turned into a conversation about what everyone was doing with their lives. My cousin Brenda mentioned her new townhouse. My cousin Derek mentioned his promotion. Renata talked about Dominic's reading level. And then someone, I think it was my Aunt Gloria, turned to me and said, almost pleasantly, Celeste, what are you up to these days? Still doing your investment thing? Still doing it, I said. And then my mother said, with the particular precision she had always saved for me, you have nothing to show for yourself, Celeste. Nothing real. Nothing lasting. The backyard went quiet. Not dramatically quiet. Not the way it does in movies, where everyone freezes. Just that particular quiet where people suddenly find their plates very interesting and stop making eye contact. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the cake, already reaching for the spatula to hand a piece to Dominic, as if she had said nothing more notable than pass the napkins. Here you go, baby, she said to Dominic, handing him the corner piece. My corner piece. I picked up a different fork, cut myself a piece from the middle, and smiled at no one in particular. Then I found a seat next to my grandmother, who squeezed my hand once and said nothing because she was 81 years old and had learned which battles were worth fighting. I ate my cake. I stayed another hour. I said goodbye to Dominic, who made me promise to watch the dinosaur documentary. I hugged Renata, who whispered, I'm sorry, into my shoulder. I kissed my grandmother's cheek. I didn't say anything to my mother before I left. I didn't need to. Here is what my mother did not know. I had been a silent investor in Hargrove Industries, her company, the company she built, the company she had never once suggested I might have a role in for 4 years and 3 months. The investment had begun not out of sentimentality and not out of some naive hope that proximity to her success would earn me a seat at her table. It had begun because the fundamentals were sound. Hargrove Industries was a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution firm with solid regional contracts and a logistics infrastructure that, with the right capital infusion, could expand into 3 new markets within 18 months. I had seen the numbers. I had done the analysis. The company was undervalued, underleveraged, and sitting on a growth opportunity that my mother's conservative financing strategy was leaving completely untouched. I was, by that point, the managing partner of Okafor Capital, a private investment firm I had built over 11 years, quietly, without fanfare, without press releases, and without telling my family. We managed $1.4 billion in assets. We had offices in Atlanta, London, and Singapore. We had a track record that two separate financial publications had written about, neither of which my mother had ever read. I had kept it quiet deliberately. Not out of shame, out of exhaustion. Because I had spent my entire adult life watching my family treat my work as a hobby, my income as luck, and my decisions as charming eccentricities that would eventually end in some sensible retreat back to a normal job. My mother had, on 4 separate occasions that I could recall specifically, suggested that I think about getting something more stable. The most recent time had been 18 months before the birthday party, at Christmas, when I had mentioned offhandedly that I was expanding our London office. "It's a nice dream," she had said. "But at some point, Celeste, you have to build something real." I had smiled and asked if anyone wanted more sweet potatoes. So when Hargrove Industries appeared in my firm's deal pipeline in the spring of that year, flagged by my associate Kwame, who had found it through a regional broker we worked with, I had reviewed the prospectus twice before I realized whose company it was. The legal name on the filings was Hargrove Medical Distribution LLC. I had cross-referenced the address, confirmed the founding date, and sat very still at my desk for about 45 seconds. Then I had called Kwame and said, "Pull together a full due diligence package. I want everything." The investment went through a shell entity, Meridian Growth Partners. It was structured as a limited partnership stake, passive capital, no operational role, no board seat, no listed name in any public filing. From my mother's perspective, Meridian Growth Partners was an institutional investor that had approached her CFO with a compelling proposal. She had never asked who was behind it. Her CFO, a meticulous man named Gerald Pittman, had done his due diligence on the entity and found nothing irregular because there was nothing irregular. Meridian was a legitimate vehicle. The investment was clean. Over 4 years, I deployed $210 million into Hargrove Industries in 3 tranches. The first tranche of $65 million allowed my mother to execute the market expansion she'd been unable to fund. She entered 2 new distribution territories in 18 months, exactly as I had projected. The second tranche of $80 million came during the supply chain disruption of the following year, when Hargrove's existing financing lines were strained and the company was quietly looking for bridge capital to maintain operations. Without it, she would have had to sell 2 of her most profitable regional contracts to a competitor. The third tranche of $65 million, deployed 8 months before the birthday party, had funded the new fulfillment center in Nashville that my mother had, at a company gala I had seen photos of on LinkedIn, described as the proudest achievement of my professional life. She had given a speech about it. She had cried. I had read the recap in a trade publication and felt something I still don't have a precise word for. Not bitterness, exactly. Something quieter and more complicated. I need to tell you something about my mother because she isn't a villain. I want to be honest about that even now. Patricia Hargrove was the daughter of a postal worker and a seamstress from Clarksdale, Mississippi. She had worked her way through a state university on partial scholarship and a full-time job at a medical supply warehouse, which was where she had first understood pharmaceutical distribution. She had started her company at 34 with $40,000 in savings and a single contract, and she had spent the next 3 decades building it into something that employed over 400 people and generated north of $280 million in annual revenue. She was formidable. She was brilliant in ways she didn't always recognize. And she had very fixed ideas about what real success looked like. Ideas that had been forged in scarcity and survival, and a generation that measured legitimacy by buildings you could point to, employees you could name, and accounts that paid out on a predictable schedule. I was her middle child, and I had never fit her framework. I had been a strange, bookish kid who spent her allowance on stock market magazines at 12 and had, by 16, talked our school's credit union into letting me participate in a junior investment simulation that I won 3 years running. My mother had found this mildly embarrassing in the way that parents sometimes find unusual children mildly embarrassing, not with cruelty, but with a faint, persistent wish that I would be a little more like everyone else. When I graduated from Howard with a finance degree and turned down a corporate banking offer to start working at a small private equity firm, she had sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Celeste, do you know what you're doing?" "Yes, Mom. Because there are real jobs available. Real, stable." "I know, Mom." She had never fully forgiven me for knowing my own mind. I think that's what it was when I look at it clearly. Not malice. An unresolved grief that I had not become the version of her she had imagined passing her legacy to. It wasn't an excuse, but it was true. My closest friend in the world, a woman named Simone Asani, had known about Hargrove Industries from the beginning. Simone was an attorney, intellectual property mostly, though she had a general counseling practice that I used for personal matters, and she was the only person outside my firm who knew the full picture. "You are building a very interesting trap," she had said, the night I first told her. "I'm making an investment, Celeste." She had given me the look. "You are making a $65 million investment in your mother's company, anonymously, while your mother tells everyone you don't understand money. This is not a passive investment. This is a message you haven't sent yet." I had thought about that for a long time. I still think about it, because Simone was right that there was something in it beyond pure financial calculation. The fundamentals were sound, that was true, and it remained true, and over 4 years the investment returned a compounding performance that made it one of the better performing positions in our portfolio. But I would be dishonest if I said the identity of the company hadn't mattered to me. I had told myself I was protecting a business that employed 400 people who had nothing to do with my mother's opinion of my career. That was also true. Both things were true simultaneously, and I had learned to hold them both. What I had not anticipated was the birthday party. I drove home from Dominic's party and sat in my car in my parking garage for about 10 minutes. My building was a converted industrial loft in the West End. I had purchased it 3 years earlier, a quiet transaction handled through a property management LLC. No announcement. No housewarming. I had simply moved in. I sat in my car and thought about my mother's voice saying nothing real, nothing lasting, and I thought about the Nashville Fulfillment Center and the supply chain bridge capital and the 2 territory expansions and the 400 employees who got direct deposit every other Friday because of money I had placed, and I thought about the fact that she had given my nephew the corner piece. I want to be clear. I did not decide in that moment. I went upstairs. I made tea. I called Simone, who listened without interrupting for 11 minutes and then said, quietly, "What do you want to do?" "I want to think about it over the weekend." "Okay. I might not do anything." "I know." I thought about it over the weekend. I walked along the Beltline on Saturday morning with my headphones in, listening to nothing, just walking. I had dinner with Kwame and his wife on Saturday evening, a low-key thing at their house where their daughter fell asleep on the couch watching a movie, and we talked about everything except work. I went to church on Sunday, which I did most Sundays, and sat in the third pew from the left where the light came in, at a particular angle I had always liked. On Sunday evening I called Simone again. "I'm going to initiate the withdrawal," I said. A pause. "Okay. Do you want me to be there when you make the call?"
"No."
"I'll handle it Monday morning." "Celeste." Another pause. "Whatever happens with your mother, make sure it's what you actually want. Not just what she made you feel on Saturday." I thought about that all night. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. I was at my desk, coffee untouched, the Atlanta skyline flat and gray through the window. I called Marcus Webb, my managing director at Okafor Capital. "Marcus, I need to initiate a withdrawal from Hargrove Industries. The full $210 million position, through Meridian. Begin the process effective immediately." A brief silence. Marcus knew the position. He did not know whose company it was. Full withdrawal? No partial exit strategy. Full withdrawal. Timeline? Standard structured exit. 30-day notice per the partnership agreement. But I want the notice filed today. Understood. I'll have the paperwork initiated within the hour. Thank you. I hung up. I drank my coffee. I had a 9 o'clock with our Singapore team, and I was on time for it. I worked through lunch. I reviewed 2 new deal packages in the afternoon. I left the office at 6:15. I did not think about Hargrove Industries again until Tuesday morning, when Gerald Pittman, my mother's CFO, who had my personal number from a previous matter unrelated to Meridian, called me at 7:49 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. By Tuesday afternoon, according to what Simone pieced together from sources she had at the firm, the Hargrove Industries board had convened an emergency session. Meridian Growth Partners' withdrawal notice represented the departure of the company's single largest capital provider, a partner whose funding had underpinned the Nashville facility, the territory expansions, and the current operational leverage the company carried. Without Meridian's committed capital, Hargrove's debt covenants on two of its primary financing lines would be immediately at risk. The board's first question, apparently, was, "Who is Meridian?" It was a reasonable question. It was the question they should have asked 4 years ago, and the question my mother had never thought to ask because the money had arrived when she needed it and had performed exactly as promised, and there was no reason, when things are going well, to look too closely at where the water comes from. Gerald Pittman, to his credit, had the answer within 18 hours. He was thorough, and he was fast, and he was probably terrified, and he traced Meridian Growth Partners through its entity structure with the help of an outside counsel who knew what they were doing. They found Okafor Capital. They found me. My mother called at 2:17 on Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting. I saw her name on my phone screen, declined the call, and returned to the meeting. At 3:41, she called again. I sent it to voicemail. At 4:52, she called a third time. I let that one ring out. At 6:09, she called Simone. Simone called me immediately after. She called me. I know. She's crying, Celeste. I sat with that. What did you tell her? I told her you weren't available and that she should try you tomorrow. Thank you. She asked if you knew. I said I couldn't speak to that. I went home. I made dinner, rice and stewed chicken, the thing my grandmother had taught me, a recipe I made when I needed to do something with my hands. I ate alone at my kitchen table with a book open that I didn't read. I thought about 400 people who got paid every other Friday. I had already instructed Marcus to structure the withdrawal over 90 days rather than 30, a managed exit that would give the company time to find replacement capital or restructure its debt position without catastrophic disruption. The business was sound. It would survive this. It would have to find a new path, but it would survive. I had not told my mother any of that yet. I thought about whether I should call her. I thought about the birthday party. I thought about Christmas and the sweet potatoes, and it's a nice dream. I thought about every version of that conversation across 30 years, the same note played in slightly different keys, and I thought about what Simone had said the very first night. You are making a message you haven't sent yet. I had finally sent it. She came to my building on Wednesday morning, unannounced. I know this because my doorman called up to say my mother was in the lobby, and I had a moment where I considered saying I wasn't available, and then I said, send her up. She came in wearing the yellow linen dress, the same one from the birthday party. I don't know if that was intentional, or if she had simply not gone home. She looked, for the first time in my memory, genuinely small. I had coffee ready. I did not hug her. I gestured to the kitchen table and said, sit down, Mom. She sat. She looked around my loft, the high ceilings, the bookshelves that covered the east wall, the piece of original art above the fireplace that I had bought from a young Ghanaian painter whose work I had followed for years. She had never been here before. I had never invited her. This is yours, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How long? 3 years. She was quiet. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. Gerald found the filings. Okafor Capital. That's your firm. Yes. And Meridian. Meridian is yours. Through a subsidiary, yes. She looked at the table. For years. For years and 3 months. Why? Her voice broke slightly on the word. Not a manipulation. I knew the difference with her by now. Genuine fracture. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about how to answer this honestly. I had rehearsed versions of this answer. I had imagined this conversation on walks and in the shower and at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. And now that it was here, all the rehearsed versions fell away and what I said was just the truth, unpolished. Because you wouldn't have let me. You would have found a reason to reject it or to diminish it or to restructure it so that it fit your understanding of what I was capable of. And I needed to make a sound investment decision, Mom. I needed to do it cleanly without that weight on it. She didn't respond immediately. The first time you needed bridge capital, I said, you were 8 days from having to sell the Memphis East contract. Your CFO had already drafted the sale terms. You don't know that because Gerald handled it and he found Meridian's proposal before he had to bring you the bad news. The Nashville facility, the speech you gave, the thing you said was the proudest achievement of your career. That was funded with my money. I watched you give that speech on LinkedIn. On my phone. Alone. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were wet. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, I said. I'm telling you because you stood at your grandson's birthday party and told our entire family that I had nothing real and nothing lasting. And I wanted you to understand what was actually real. Silence. The withdrawal is structured over 90 days, I said. It's not a cliff. The business has time to refinance or find replacement capital. I have no interest in destroying what 400 people depend on. But I am not continuing to fund a company whose owner does not believe I am capable of understanding money. My mother set down her coffee mug. She was crying now, quietly, in the way she had always cried, no sound, just tears moving down her face while her expression stayed controlled. A lifetime of refusing to be seen as weak. I'm sorry, she said. 3 words I had waited 30 years for. I sat with them. I let them be real. I did not immediately say it's okay, because it wasn't entirely, and I had promised myself I would stop saying things that weren't entirely true to make the air in a room easier to breathe. I know, I said instead. We sat with that for a while. The weeks that followed were not a fairy tale. I want to be honest about that too. Gerald Pittman, working with an investment bank I quietly recommended through a third party, found a refinancing structure for Hargrove Industries within 6 weeks. The company's fundamentals were strong enough, in large part because of the 4 years of strategic capital I had provided, that 2 institutional lenders competed for the deal. The Nashville facility remained operational. The territory contracts held. The 400 people got their direct deposits. My mother and I spoke on the phone twice a week. The conversations were careful at first, polite in the way of 2 people learning to be around each other, without the old scripts. She asked about my work with a genuine curiosity she hadn't shown before. I asked about the business, and she answered without defensiveness. We were not, overnight, the mother and daughter I had sometimes imagined we might be. But we were something new, and something new was more than I had honestly expected. Renata called me the day after the Wednesday meeting. What happened, she said, and I told her the version I was able to tell, which was most of it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I always knew you were doing something extraordinary. I just didn't know how extraordinary. She paused. Can Dominic still come stay with you this summer? Of course. He finished the dinosaur documentary. Tell him I'll call this weekend. There are things I lost in this that I have not fully accounted for yet. I lost 4 years of being known. For years during which my mother gave speeches about the proudest achievements of her life, and I sat in other cities, alone, reading the recaps. I lost whatever version of her respect I might have had if I had announced myself clearly from the beginning and forced her to decide, publicly, accountably, whether she believed in me. Maybe she would have. I don't know. I chose the other path. I don't regret the investment. The business logic was sound, the return was real, and 400 people are employed because of decisions I made in a quiet office without anyone watching. That matters to me. It will continue to matter to me. But Simone was right for years ago. It was a message I hadn't sent yet. And messages held that long have a cost. They compound, the way capital compounds, quietly, invisibly, until the number is too large to pretend it was ever small. What I know now, sitting at my kitchen table on an ordinary Thursday morning with my second cup of coffee and the Atlanta skyline turning gold outside the window, is this. I built something real. I built something lasting. I did it without her permission, without her knowledge, and without her belief, and it was enough. It was more than enough. I am still deciding what I want to build next. Dominic's dinosaur documentary, it turns out, was about the Cretaceous, Paleogene extinction event, the asteroid, the aftermath, the extraordinary fact that the descendants of some dinosaurs became birds and flew. He called me on a Sunday afternoon and talked about it for 40 minutes straight. He wanted to know how the small things survived when the big things didn't. I told him I thought about that question a lot. He said, "Auntie Cece, do you think something could survive anything if it just kept going?" I thought about a woman in Memphis in 1987 with $40,000 in savings and a single contract. I thought about a strange, bookish kid reading stock market magazines at 12. I thought about 400 people and a Nashville facility and a speech I watched on a phone screen alone. "Yes, baby," I said. "I think if it keeps going, it can survive almost anything." He seemed satisfied with that. He moved on to asking if I had a favorite dinosaur, which I did not, but I told him we could figure one out together. "Next time you visit," he said. "Next time I visit," I said. I marked it in my calendar. I don't miss appointments with people I love.